Minister Joly actually joins me right now in studio, and I appreciate you making the time for us. It's good to see you.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you so much. I'm actually going to start where my guest just left off. I had been asking him about Ukraine's ask for Canada when it comes to sanctions. And he says, thanks for the ones today, but we are really looking for more. And more specifically, we are looking to cut off all trade with Russia. Does Canada endorse that position? Is that something Canada is going to do?
Well, you know, we know today that we impeded significantly our trade with Russia. Canada doesn't have a lot of trade with Russia. You've mentioned it in your interview. Obviously, the EU, European countries have more reliance on different goods, including, like you mentioned, oil and gas. But I think today is an awful day in history. But at the same time, it is a day where the West, so the EU, Canada, the UK, the US, and Japan, shown a very strong united front. We came up with strong sanctions that were coordinated. We all worked in lockstep. Today we announced export controls, for example, so no goods from Canada in the aerospace, in the IT sector, in the mineral sector will go to Russia. We announced that more than 60 people would be sanctioned by Canada. Some of those very close to President Putin himself, including the Minister of Defense, the Minister of Justice, and also the Minister of Finance. And also we announced that all major banks would be cut off from dealing with Canada, but obviously with the US and other European countries.
I have to ask you, though, about the strength of those sanctions, because a few days ago I sat in this chair, I listened to the press conference that you and the Prime Minister gave, the sanctions you introduced then. This expands most certainly on what you announced then and what other allies announced then. But look what's happened in the 48 hours since that press conference a few days ago, right? It did not deter Mr. Putin one iota. In fact, many people are surprised at how aggressive the offensive has been in spite of the threat of sanctions. Why should Canadians believe that while the threat of your government's sanctions made no difference, the imposition of them will?
Well, because they will have an impact. They will have an impact on the Russian economy, obviously. They will have an impact on people around Putin. Bit by bit, it will have an impact on how people perceive the action of Putin in Ukraine, and therefore the entire idea is to make sure that there's no public support for this action. And obviously, meanwhile, we're continuing our pressure. We're looking at different means also to impose maximum pain to the Russian regime, and that's what we'll continue to do.
I guess I wonder, though, as someone watching from a distance here in the past 24 hours, seeing how great the offensive is, why wait? Why hope for an approach that affects Putin bit by bit? Clearly, he is not waiting until, the next round of sanctions before he decides to up his pressure, right? He's in there.
We're not waiting. Today, we announced...
You announced one round and then you said there's more to come.
No, because we're looking at every single way to inflict pain to Russia right now.
But I guess, what's the marker? At what point do you decide, okay, now it's time for the next level? If it isn't the invasion of Ukraine, what more is it?
We know there are more sanctions to be announced. My team and I have been working on a day one package that is one of the strongest of the entire alliance. And we will continue to announce names starting tomorrow and over again the coming days. That's what we'll do. That's been the strategy. And at the same time, we're looking at creative new ways to make sure that Vladimir Putin himself is also affected.
Does that mean you're going to sanction him personally?
We're looking at all options.
Why haven't you done that already?
Because we need to make sure that we're coordinated. We need to make sure that at the end of the day, Canada's working with all the other countries. And also, we know that we're not only stronger when we're united, but we know that we have to put maximum pressure through also other countries in the world. And that's why I'm in contact with other countries in the world, because what happened today is something that we have never seen since the Second World War. It's affecting the entire architecture, security architecture of Europe, but also of the world. And that's why we need to make sure that other countries sanction exactly the Russian regime.
Yeah, and I do understand the point that everyone acting together is certainly more powerful than the individual. But I guess, again, I wonder, like, he has invaded Ukraine. You described it today in, very succinct words. You called them liars, right?
Yes, that's exactly what happened.
And Minister Freeland said Putin cements his place in the ranks of the reviled European dictators who caused such carnage in the 20th century. Again, does the strength of the sanctions you announced today match those words? Is it not understandable if Canadians doubt whether your actions are matching your rhetoric at this juncture?
They are. They are, and Canadians should be absolutely sure that that's the case. We had imposed sanctions already following the invasion of Crimea, 400 of them. 2 days ago, we announced a dealings ban with the two so-called independent territories that were recognized by the Putin regime. We had also announced sanctions on 2 banks, and we had made sure that we were coordinated with the other countries when it came to really making pressure on the regime. And what we're doing today is even more, because the entire financial sector of Russia is affected right now. The closest guard of Putin is affected right now. We are going ahead with making sure that critical items that the Russian economy needs to function, including IT, including aerospace, including minerals, won't be sent to Russia. We're not the only country. The US is doing so. Yes. The EU is doing so. That will affect the manufacturing sector in Russia. That will affect their capacity to even be able to provide goods to their people. And so that's sad for the Russian people that, of course, are not necessarily linked to the decision by the Kremlin, but clearly what Putin did today will bear cost.
Let me ask the question in a different way. I again understand that you want to take additional sanctions or make additional sanctions on Russia in coordination with your allies. Does Canada, does the federal government in this country support sanctioning Putin personally?
We're looking at all options.
Do you support it?
We're looking at all options.
You can't say whether you would support sanctioning him personally?
How we've worked this since the beginning of this crisis, we knew that President Putin had a choice between diplomacy and deterrence and dialogue, and at the same time, severe consequences. He decided to go ahead on the path of war and to face severe consequences. We know that the best way for him and the Russian regime to be able to bear this, to deal with the severe consequences is when we're completely aligned, and when we don't act only one alone, but all united together.
And I understand that completely.
So
what I'm asking for, on behalf of Canadians watching tonight, though, is what is the federal government's position? For example, do you, as a federal government, support, and I'm not saying will you, because I understand that has to be done in concert, do you support sanctioning Putin personally? Do you support kicking Russia out of SWIFT?
And as I mentioned, all these options are on the table.
But that's not an answer, with respect. I understand you're considering it, but can you speak for the government on your position?
My position and the position of the government is these conversations will happen within our allies. And Canada's role in this diplomatic work has been to unite allies, because there are different realities, and of course, there are different interests. We need, as a country, as a middle power, to play that role, to have a strong unity. Fashi, there's never been a strong unity like there is right now since the Second World War. Why? Because there's one villain. There is one threat to our security, which is Russia. And Canadians watching us tonight can know that the government takes this threat extremely seriously, and we're acting accordingly.
And in that vein, that's why I'm asking those questions, because I have listened to your words very specifically today, the Prime Ministers, Minister Freeland, Minister Anand. You're unequivocal in condemning Russia, in condemning Putin's action and Putin individually. And I'm just asking how far you're willing to go in that, because I think what Canadians are wondering is, to what degree will their actions match their words? Because you've taken the words now to that point. Are you prepared to go that far with sanctions? I'm just asking, do you support, as a federal government, going after Putin personally? Do you support getting rid of Russia out of SWIFT? Because there is consternation among allies. There is some disagreement among allies on that point. So where does Canada stand? That's all.
So you've asked me the question, you've had my answer. What I can tell you, though, is the government is ready to go very far. And that's why I'll be working with my colleagues to make sure that we have a strong response. Because while we're having this interview, people are dying in Ukraine right now, and there's strong shelling. And of course, we need to act. Meanwhile, what we'll do, we've already made sure to provide financial support. We've also provided lethal weapons. And again, on this side as well, all options are on the table. We are taking these decisions by the hour. And of course, we're on high alert.
Okay, Minister, I'll leave it there. I appreciate your time as always. Thank you. That's Mélanie Joly. She's the Minister of Foreign Affairs. Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video.